This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes.
Welcome to the Bring Your Product Ideas to Life podcast. Practical advice and inspiration to help you create and sell your own physical products. Here's your host, Vicky Weinberg.
Hi, today on the podcast I'm talking to Anna Heneback. Anna is an e-commerce consultant working with SMEs to sell more online with 15 years industry experience from Net-a-Porter and H&M. So we talked specifically today about e-commerce stores. You might recall we had an episode a little while ago talking about websites. So this is actually a little bit more than that. We're talking today more about stores and the functionality of a store that's designed to sell products, what that needs to look like, what features it needs to have, and some great tips to increase conversions to your site, as well as and had a fantastic tip I never even would have thought of about how to keep your site updated and relevant that's actually so simple and something I would never have even considered doing. So listen in for that. And so now I would love to introduce you to Anna. So hi Anna, thank you so much for being here.
Hi Vicky, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So can we start please by you giving us an introduction to yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Anna Heneback. I'm an e-commerce consultant and I help small to medium sized businesses to sell more online. And I do that by creating, optimizing and managing e-commerce websites.
Perfect, thank you. So let's start, Anna, with, so is do you think it's vital to have an actual e-commerce site if you're selling products, or can you sort of add a payment option to an existing site? What do you think makes the most sense if you're someone, you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I'm about to start selling products and I just don't know where to start?
So I think that really depends on if you're a new business and you know that your business is selling products and you want to sell products through your website, then I think it really makes sense to have an e-commerce website from the outset, because they are set up to they're designed and built in order to be able to sell products. That's their sole purpose. Otherwise, if you already have a website and you have a services business and you decide that you want to sell products as well, then that's the time where it makes sense to add a payment method to your site and be able to sell products on your site. But I would say that if your business is primarily a product business and you want to sell products, then yeah, you need the e-commerce functionality.
Okay, Anna, thank you. So I've invited you on today to talk about e-commerce sites because I know that's what your expertise is in. So let's start with, if you're starting business from scratch, selling products, what are some really good e-commerce site options that you can be thinking about?
So there's quite a wide range of e-commerce website providers out there. My favourite one is Shopify, because I think that has really got everything that you need to be able to sell products on a site. They are built and designed to sell products and nothing else. They don't have any other function really. You wouldn't use Shopify if you were just setting up a services-based website or an informational website at all. So that's really all they're geared up to do. There are others out there as well. So, for example, you've got BigCommerce and you've got a couple of other options. But I think Shopify is the one that I tend to recommend because I think it's got everything that you need. There are other options as well. So you can add payment functionality and selling functionality to any website. So, for example, WordPress, you can add WooCommerce, Squarespace and Wix website builders such as like those also have. You can also now sell through those websites as well. But I tend to find that they end up being websites with the ability to accept sales rather than being a store with the functionality to sell online. So it has a website on the front.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I use Shopify myself actually for my own store, and I remember when I started out, it was really easy to set up, and I also quite like the peace of mind that it was an e-commerce piece of software and that it would do all the things I needed it to do. So I didn't even have to really think about what I needed it to do because that back end stuff was taken care of.
Exactly. It's got, I mean, it's not just a website that you need. What you need is an online store. So you need all of the back end functionality. So like stock management and order management and customer management and sending out emails to, transactional emails to say thank you for your order and shipping confirmations and all of this kind of thing. I think that sometimes I think that Shopify can be slightly underrated, especially by designers and developers, because they don't really see that side of things. They're more focused on the front end website, and the downside of Shopify is that the website functionality is slightly limited, like compared to something like WordPress, where you can design absolutely anything that you want to. You have like effectively a blank slate, whereas Shopify has a more limited capacity, but I think that's quite a good thing because you don't necessarily want to be reinventing the wheel every time. There are certain things that you need to have in your e-commerce store, and those are all going to be there. And then you don't necessarily want to have a website that's completely, out there that nobody really understands how to use.
I see what you mean. And actually, I mean, in my experience with Shopify, you can still make a site that looks really nice. I think it is obviously because of the way it's set up, you haven't got loads of flexibility, but you can still have something that looks really nice and really professional. And I guess that's one of the most important things, as well as obviously, maybe being branded, etc. But I think the fact that it looks professional and it works is probably a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Particularly if you're just starting out, really what you need is something that works.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something really interesting there that I hadn't actually thought of, was that it's not a website. Well, it is a website, but it's not a website you need. It's a store. And I thought that was really interesting. So would you mind just talking us through, you were talking about the fact that Shopify obviously does everything you need. So what are some of those features that you need on an e-commerce store versus a website?
Yeah, so there are things like, so obviously you need to be able to accept payments. You need to have a secure checkout, and you need to be able to connect payment gateways. And so accepting payments is one thing. There are a number of like security issues that you need to think about. So as well as the secure payment gateways, also you need to have an SSL certificate, which is where you have the HTTPS at the beginning of your website instead of HTTP. That's now a requirement. You need to have another thing that Shopify does out of the box is that they have a mobile responsive site. So that anything you create in Shopify is going to look good on both desktop and mobile. And that's really, really important these days because most of your customers, in all likelihood, are going to be browsing your site on mobile. So actually your mobile site is even more important than your desktop site, because that's where your customers are going to be. And there are a few other legal things that you need as well, like you need to have a refund policy, you need to have terms of service, you need to set out how you're going to be, how you operate the site, and and billing, and then you need to have a super annoying EU cookie pop-up bar as well.
And are those features, are they things like the policies and the cookies, and are they things that are built into the e-commerce site, or things that you have to go away and create yourself?
So if you're using Shopify, they're all included, especially if you're using the new functionality. The pop-up bar, the cookie pop-up hasn't been included in the old functionality, but Shopify have just released some new functionality called Online Store 2.0, which has got loads more features, and that's included there. If you're using a website builder, if you're using WordPress, then you can enable WooCommerce, which will do a lot of these things for you. And if you're using one of the website builders, then a lot of these things will be included, but possibly not everything. So
perfect, thank you. And I suppose even if you're using Shopify and it's sort of generating these policies for you, it's still probably a good idea to have a read through and just make sure they do reflect, you know, what you're happy with, like the returns policy, for example. I'm sure they provide a template, but it's always probably good to review yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. With the refund policy in particular, they will provide something standard, but you might not want to do exactly the same thing as they are offering, as they have on their template. So you can really decide, like if you want to offer 30 days as standard, or if you want to offer something else. Or if there are certain product exceptions, for example. So yeah, it's always best to take this template but adapt it for your own needs.
That's perfect, thank you. And you may or may not know this, Anna, so I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but is 30 days the minimum that you can offer? I think that might be right, but do you know?
I don't think that it used to be. It did used to be, but I don't think that it is anymore. And it also depends on different countries. So I believe in the UK, it's not a legal requirement that it must be 30 days anymore.
Okay, well, that's definitely something someone can go and check when they're writing their policy. It's probably just good to be aware of that. So that we've talked about the features that an e-commerce website definitely needs, but then you touched on a few other things earlier that I guess might be considered things that are nice to have. So you were talking about, you know, emails updating the customer on their order status, for example. So can you talk through some of those additional things that people might want to, you know, they might not be necessary, but people might want to think about including on their site?
Yeah, of course. So there's a number of things that I think would be classed as nice to have, or certainly don't come as standard. Build trust on your website is, I would say, almost it's nice to have, but it's almost essential. So adding reviews from customers that have bought your products, like your products, having those on the site can really help to build trust. And I'm not just talking about testimonials where you have a few people giving glowing reviews, but also having the customer review, the reviews functionality on all of your products can really help to build trust. And also you can have user-generated content as another form of what we call social proof. And that is where you get people to use your products, and you can, for example, you can have an Instagram feed where you've got real people using your products and ideally raving about them. That will really help.
That sounds great. And of course you could link to that from your website as well.
Yes, exactly. And then there's a few other things that I would say are really good to have. So anything that will so any sort of marketing functions, so like being able to, you need to connect your email, maybe having a blog to bring in organic traffic, social media, adding sales channels such as Google, Facebook, Pinterest, anything that gets your products to a wider audience. And then on top of that, if you've got any sort of retargeting functionality, so for example, abandoned cart emails are really good for that. And things like if you have reviews functionality that will email your customers a couple of weeks after they've received their product and then ask for a review, then that's a good way of getting your customers to return to your website, because if they return to your website to leave a review, then they might also be browsing and finding something else that they like. So it's a good way of getting people to return. And then also one really important thing is to connect some analytics functionality like Google Analytics, because that will help you to measure and monitor your success. You'll be able to see, it just gives you an extra layer of information on top of your sales data that you would be getting anyway. So you can see really how your site's performing and how people are finding you and where they're landing, and you can see a lot more about the customer journey that way as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And just coming back to some of the automation, so sort of emailing the customer updates and abandoned checkout, that all sounds really necessary, but it also sounds quite, it might sound quite complicated. Are these things that are built into tools such as Shopify? So things that are relatively simple to set up?
So some of these come as standard. So the abandoned cart emails are set up as standard. And then everything else, you can add an app. So go to the App Store, and then there's loads and loads of apps that you can that will kind of do this functionality for you. That you just connect in, and it's quite simple to add them in. I'd say the hardest thing is actually knowing which app to go for in the first place, because there are so many. So it's good to get a recommendation.
Yeah, I think I might use MailChimp with my own Shopify store from memory. I know that when someone buys from me, they do get a nice email saying thank you, and then they do get an email saying it's on the way. But it was all set up such a long time ago, I'll be honest. I've sort of almost forgotten that it happens.
Right.
Okay. It works well.
Yeah. So actually those transactional emails, the ones to say thank you for your purchase and it's on the way, and so any emails that are related to an actual order, those are transactional emails that come through Shopify. MailChimp will only be doing your so if you're doing newsletters, if you're doing regular newsletters to your subscribers, it will be doing newsletters and those kind of marketing emails that you're probably sending out.
Ah, perfect. Well, yeah, I mean, that does prove the fact that I did set it and forget about it. But speaking of those emails, I do remember sort of all this time ago when I did it, what I do remember is sort of, writing a nice email for thanking customers for their purchase. So do you have any advice for those sort of the transactional emails? Because I know Shopify does give you the option to personalize them. Do you have any tips or advice on what you can on what you can include in those, or how to make that a nice experience for the customer to get an email from you?
So first of all, I think it really depends on the stage of your business. If you're just starting out, leave them as is. Don't worry about it. They'll fulfill your purpose. I feel like when you're setting up a site, when you're a brand new business, there's so many things to look at, and it's quite a steep learning curve. So I think that's something that you don't really need to worry about too much. I would say add your branding to them. I'd say that's essential. But if you're just starting out, I'd leave them as is. But if you're a more established business, then you can. I've seen some businesses tweak the copy so that it sounds a lot more. So that the copy sounds a lot more on brand, and you can say fun things in there and make them more. Make them a bit more interesting. And the other thing is the subject line is really, really important with email. So if you're going to change anything, then I would go for the subject line, because that's probably the thing that will make the most difference. But I think when it comes to email, probably I would say focus more of your efforts on your marketing emails and on your so that because that's where you're trying to bring in that really wide audience to your site.
That's really good advice. Thank you. I really like the fact you said if you're starting out, don't even, worry about this initially, because you're right. There is just so much to do, isn't there, when you're first getting your site set up. So it's really nice to have permission to leave something for a bit later.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a bit overwhelming, I know, when you're first setting one up. So no, there are things that you can just leave to start with.
Oh, that's really good to know. Thank you, Anna. So let's talk a little bit about when you're setting your site up. Do you have any tips and advice? I say do you, I'm sure you do, in terms of how to best present your products online? Do you have any advice about, how to show them at their best?
Yes. Yeah. So if we're thinking about merchandising your products, I think the key here is relevance. So think about what are the most relevant for your customers right now. So you can be looking at seasonality. If we're going into winter and you're selling clothing, then people are going to be wanting coats and jumpers and scarves and warm things. That's what you want to be presenting to your customers. Alternatively, anything that's kind of newsworthy. So If you have some new lines that have come in, or something that's been really popular and has just come back in stock, that's good to present to your customers. Or anything that's selling particularly well. That's also something that is kind of interesting for your customers to see. And I would say as well that it's quite important to re-merchandise your site fairly regularly. Like, I would say at least for a small business, I think doing it at least once a month is a good idea, because then you're capturing the differences in the seasons, and it's a good idea to have something new and fresh for your customers, for your returning customers to look at. If you have the same homepage and the same sites all the time, people don't really have a reason to come back. So you want to think about getting people to be returning to your site to have a look, like fairly regularly.
Does that mean, so when you say re-merchandising, does that mean sort of just providing something new, whether that's a visual or a blog post, or just something to keep the site fresh?
Yeah, exactly. So just having something new, something to hook people in. If you've got a product business and you've got exactly the same, you're presented with the same images all the time, then first of all, they're going to start to look a bit stale, and secondly, it's not going to hook the customers in. You want to get them browsing, so there needs to be something that kind of piques their interest, to get them to continue on the site. Otherwise, the risk is that they see it, so I've seen that before, and they leave.
That's really interesting. I've never actually thought about doing that. And could that just be as simple as changing the main image on your homepage, for example? I'm assuming it doesn't have to be a big overhaul.
No, exactly. That's a really good start, is to just change the image on the homepage. Think about as well where, I mean, every site is different. So most often the homepage is going to be the most the sort of the most common landing page. So yes, that's the one that I would say pay most attention to. But yeah, changing the image. Like, maybe you can re-rank products really easily. So by ranking, I mean sort of sorting. So you've got maybe you've got some new products at the top of your product lists, or maybe you've got like bestsellers, or just kind of changing the order of things so that it's just slightly different. That tends to do well to kind of intrigue customers to browse further.
Thank you. And what about if you only have one product at the moment, which some people starting out will? Is there any advice on what you can do to keep that as a site with a single product looking fresh and getting people back?
That is a really good question. I guess the same rules kind of apply, where you can kind of just mix it up a little bit. Maybe switch up the imagery, maybe kind of change around the order of things. There are other really, as a small business, I know that you don't necessarily have that much time on your hands to be going in and changing updating the website all the time. But so there are quick fixes you can do, or little cheats that you can do to make it updated. One really good one is to link your Instagram feed to your site, because you're probably posting on Instagram quite regularly. If that's also on your website, that's a really good way of keeping your site updated, so that there's something fresh on there. So you can make use of the content that you're already producing and just kind of move that around, so that that's also showing on the homepage on your site, for example.
Oh, that's a great idea. So sort of pulling posts from Instagram through to your homepage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's a great tip. Thank you. That's a really nice one. Sorry, Anna.
It's okay, go on.
I was going to ask as well, what about the actual product pages? So the page of all the product information, where hopefully people are going to go and make the purchase. Have you got any tips on how to best present your products on the page?
Yeah, so first of all, you're going to need really good imagery on your site. So and by good, I mean it needs to be really clear what the product is. Ideally, especially if you're selling clothing, but even if you're not, taking lots of images from different angles, so you can see the front and the back, for example. So really good imagery, and then a good kind of selling description is also really important. So think about describing not only what the product is, but also really hooking in with some really good copy that will really good sales copy that will really sell the product.
Thank you. And you may or may not be able to answer this. I completely appreciate that. But I'm just wondering if there's like an optimum length for that copy. And the reason I ask is I see a lot of sites sort of day to day in what I do. And sometimes you can go to a website and there's literally like 2 lines of text on the products page, which in my opinion isn't anywhere near enough. Or there's there's the opposite where there's sort of reams of it and you're scrolling down and there's lots of technical information. Is there a middle ground? Is there something people should be aiming for? Because I'm not sure either of those are quite right.
So I think there is a middle ground, but there isn't, like, I couldn't say to you that there's a set number of characters that you should always use in your product description, because that's just not, and also because every business is different. So sometimes there's a lot to get across in the product description. I mean, you're going to need, it's hard to describe exactly what the kind of right length is going to be, because I think there is a just right kind of, something is going to be just right, but it's going to be slightly different for different businesses. So not too short, not too long, absolutely. But I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I've seen sites with very lengthy product descriptions with a really high conversion rate, and equally other businesses with very short product descriptions with a high conversion rate. So it's really hard to say. What I would say though is you can always test it out. If you think your conversion rate's a bit low, and particularly in that stage from when somebody is looking at a product page to them adding to cart, what you can do is just test out different versions. So you can try extending the description and see if that makes a difference. It might be the thing that really tweaks it, or it might not. But until you test it, you never know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think as well, when you were talking, I was thinking actually it probably depends a lot on the type of product you're selling as well, because if you're buying clothes, for example, there's only so much you need to know. You want to know what it's made of. You want to know maybe a bit about the fit. If there's a model, it's quite useful to know sort of, how tall they are. So, so you get an idea of how it will fit on you, maybe washing instructions, but you wouldn't really expect text if you were buying a jumper, let's say, would you? Whereas if you were buying a computer that's on the other end of the spectrum, you would expect, you wouldn't want just a paragraph. So I guess it probably really does depend. I think
and I think you've hit on something there as well, is how important the visual aspect is and how important the functionality of the piece is. So because obviously with the jumper you could explain in words, you can't get across in words how that jumper looks, and that's almost the most important thing. Whereas with a computer, just a picture of the computer is not going to tell you how good it is.
Yes. And I think a way perhaps to tell if something's missing from your product page, whether it's visual or text, is if people are asking you questions. Because I think if you're getting asked lots of similar, so I've seen sometimes on someone's Instagram post where someone said, how long is this, or or what size does it go up to, and I think if someone's asking you the same question over and over, it probably means it's missing. So you might want to think about adding that in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's direct feedback, isn't it?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about conversions. We were touched on that earlier. Do you have any tips, or I say do you, I know you do, Anna. What tips have you got for improving conversions on your e-commerce site?
So yes, so I do have some tips. First of all, I would say make sure you're measuring it. So connect up with Google Analytics. Make sure you're enabling e-commerce tracking, including enhanced e-commerce, because that will give you so much data and so much information about not just what your conversion rate is, but why it's at that level. So you'll be able to break it down into lots of different areas, and then start to be able to look for clues as to what you can change, and the factors that affect it, and which ones you might be able to impact. And I would also say track it regularly. So keep checking it. So you can test out different functions and see what effect they have on the conversion rate. So one simple way to do that, for example, is if you look at, for example, if you look at the different channels that you have, that you're the different traffic channels that people are using to visit your site, you'll have things like organic traffic, so ones that find you from SEO, and you'll have like Instagram, and you'll have Facebook, and you'll be able to see where these people are coming from. And then you'll also be able to see what their conversion rate is. So if you find that certain channels give you a much higher conversion rate, then you know that those are the ones that you should be investing more marketing budget into. So that's a really simple and like non-technical way of increasing your conversion rate. Aside from that, there are a couple of quite simple things that I would say that you can do. So, for example, one is, again, these aren't technical things, but just make sure you have a really clear delivery and return policy, because that presents a barrier to purchase if it's not known by customers. So just make sure that's super clear, so that there's, to remove that barrier. Things like payment methods, making sure that PayPal, you've got different payment methods available on your site. So PayPal is one of them, Google Pay, Apple Pay. Just make it really easy for people to buy on your site. And then another one is very important: check your site on mobile. Make sure that it is that it's functioning on mobile, and that the majority of your customers are going to be able to use your site and browse and then also to buy.
Oh, thank you so much for all of that. And I think a lot of what you touched on there was all about creating a really easy experience for the customer. Is there anything else that you'd want to mention around that, sort of how to make like the journey for the customer as pleasant and as straightforward as possible?
Yes. So I think with when you're thinking about the customer journey, you always also want to think about the sales funnel. So when at first you want to be attracting people to your site, you just want them to visit your site, and then the next stage is that you want them to browse different products, and then the stage after that is that you want them to be adding those products to cart, and then the stage after that is checking out. So if you think about the journey in that way, then you can think about how you can get as many people as possible to the next stage. So, for example, if you have a lot of people finding you through a blog post, for example, then you want to make sure that so you've got lots of people arriving to your site. Brilliant. How are you going to hook them in to also get them browsing? So you're going to need links back into your store. Make sure that the blog post is optimized so that it's also then drawing the people that found that blog post further into the store, browsing your products, so that you can kind of guide them onwards on that journey. You don't want to, for example, distract them with pop-ups. Let's say you've got them from the blog post onto the product page. You don't want a pop-up at that point saying, "Hi, subscribe to my newsletter," because they're looking at your product and you want them to be following on then to adding to cart and carrying on. So I think if you just kind of think about the customer journey in those terms, then it can really, really help.
That's really useful, thank you. And a little bit earlier you were touching on payment options, and I didn't even think about this, but is there are there certain payment providers we should be adding to an e-commerce site, or sort of a number of options we should be giving? I'm assuming that you shouldn't just make it so that everyone has to enter their card details, because there are lots of other options available now. How do we go about thinking about that stage?
So so I think so this depends on which country you're selling to. Assuming that most of your audience are going to be selling in the UK, then you need to look at the most popular payment providers there. So in the UK, PayPal is one of them. It's really high up on the list of, if you look at like the statistics on the transactions that are made online, PayPal is one of the highest, one of the most popular payment methods. So it makes sense to have that on your site. I know that a lot of small business owners don't really like PayPal because the fees are relatively high. But if you think of it in terms of an investment, that if you have it, you can increase your conversion rate and your sales that much more. So it is, you need to kind of look at it as kind of almost an investment cost rather than an investment rather than a cost. And other than that, anything that just makes it really, really easy for people to buy. I think if somebody has to go and get their credit card out and put all the details in and put in the, and find all the, there's a lot to type in, and I think that in itself is a bit of a barrier to purchase as well. So you really want to make that as easy, as simple as possible.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know myself as a customer, I love using PayPal because all your details are saved and it also feels secure. If I have to actually sort of walk to the other room and get my purse out, I know it sounds silly and I know it sounds also incredibly lazy, but there is that chance that I'll get waylaid on the way, and it won't actually happen. So it's nice to know that I'm not alone.
You are definitely not alone in that.
Oh, good. So I guess adding PayPal is a good idea. And it's interesting you mentioned the fee, because I have heard lots of small businesses say that, as you say, but I think that the fact that PayPal is something that customers trust, I guess we have to be thinking sometimes from the point of view of the customer rather than what we would prefer.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But if you have alternatives as well, then that will, then maybe they won't use PayPal. Maybe they'll use, if they're shopping on an iPhone and you have Apple Pay enabled, then that's going to be the default payment method. So you can think about that as well. If you have a range of different payment options, then hopefully they'll choose one of the ones with the lower fees. So if you can try and sort of make it easy for them in that way.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that Shopify gives you all of these options either as standard or as an add-on somewhere.
Yes, yeah, exactly. You just need to set it up in the payments area.
Perfect. And can you, as a store owner, get any insight on which payment methods people are using? I know, of course, you can't see their payment details, but can you actually see how people are choosing to purchase? Is that something that's visible?
It is visible. I'm not sure if it's available as one of the standard reports, but what you can do, and this is a bit long-winded, but you could export all of your orders and then look at the data that way to get an idea.
Perfect. Yes, if someone really wanted to know, then they could go off and do that. Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. I've just got 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that I know you work with lots of small business owners on their sites. What are some of the common issues that you see, and do you have any sort of tips so that we can avoid them as best as we can?
Absolutely. So the top one that I see that is not having a clear enough delivery policy. So sometimes, quite often, I'll look at the delivery page and it starts by saying something like, so I go to the post office on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. And and as from a customer point of view, all you want to know is how much does delivery cost and how long will it take to get here? That's really all they want to know. And then you can, so if you put those at the top, make that most important, most prominent, and then you can put all the information about which delivery service you use and how often you dispatch deliveries and that kind of thing. Put that afterwards. But if you think about from the point of view of the customer, how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take for the parcel to arrive, that's the main thing that I think is important to say. And also, I would make it super clear on like your product pages, and if you can put it all over your site, that's ideal. Really, put it in the footer maybe, because I think that makes a really big difference. Another thing closely related to that is having a not very customer friendly returns policy. So I know that a lot of small business owners have been stung by like 1 or 2 or maybe more sort of issues with customers trying to return things that maybe they shouldn't. And I get it. Returns are a hassle. Nobody likes returns, and even nobody really wants to order things and send them back either from a customer point of view. But if you have a returns policy that is very kind of unfriendly and really gets across that kind of pain from the small business point of view, I think what you need to do is kind of flip it over and think that the returns policy is actually it's actually a sales. It's a sales policy. You want to, again, remove that barrier to purchase by saying that, if you're not sure, buy it, and then if you don't like it, you can always return it to me. That's, you kind of, customers want that reassurance that if it doesn't work out, then they haven't really lost anything. And if you think about the fact that the majority of people that buy something will actually not return it, what you're doing by having a really clear returns policy, a customer-friendly returns policy, is actually increasing your sales. So that's those two things are very common, I see.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you. Because I can totally see what you're saying. Returns are a pain, but you're right. I think I've got something sitting in my house now that I have to return. I haven't, it's coming up on the deadline, just because it's such a pain to the free returns label on and take it to the post. You're right. The customers don't like to return things.
No.
But it's really hard, isn't it? I think sometimes as a business owner, you almost have to put your customer, you have to think of it as a customer as well, because you you can lose. I think it's really easy for all of us to lose sight of that. But I guess the way that we act as consumers and customers is probably similar to how other people act. So I guess we just have to. So thank you for reminding us to remind ourselves of that, because that's so helpful. Thank you so much for all you've shared. I've got one final question before we finish, if that's okay. I hope this isn't too tricky, which is, what would your number one piece of advice be for somebody looking to set up their e-commerce store, or perhaps even to optimize a store they have now?
So my top piece of advice for somebody setting up their e-commerce store is done is better than perfect. I see that you always want to, especially if you're creating a site, and it's kind of like it's so important and to you, and you really want to get it absolutely perfect before you launch it. And actually launching the site can feel really hard, even though it's just a case of kind of pushing the button to make it go live. You kind of want to just kind of tweak those last things and fiddle with some text here, and it can take a really, really long time. But I would say done is better than perfect. Just do it. Don't let the self-doubt kick in. Just launch the site, and get over that hurdle, and just do it, because an e-commerce site is relatively fluid, so you can iterate as you go. So what you launch that first time is not necessarily going to be what it's going to look like in, say, 6 months to a year's time. So it's just getting over that.
That's really good advice. Thank you. And I have to say, you blew my mind a little bit earlier when you said about constantly refreshing your site, because I'll be honest, I launched my Shopify site years ago, and of course there have been changes. But as for the last time it had any kind of homepage refresh, I couldn't even tell you. But I think knowing that we should be doing that regularly, I think probably hopefully makes it easier for people to sort of press the button to make it go live, knowing that it's something that can and should be updated anyway. Because you're right, it can really hold you back, can't it, wanting to get everything perfect?
Exactly.
Yes, so thank you for that. I think that's fantastic advice.
You're welcome.
And what about sorry, I did say that was the last question, but I thought of one more. What about if someone has a site now, is there anything really quick they could do that you just try to see if it makes a difference?
To optimize it, I think this goes back to looking at your analytics, working out what your conversion rate is, and trying to work out what factors are really affecting it. That's going to be your first point of call. Work out what the factors are, and then see how you can change those. And it might not be, so Google Analytics won't necessarily give you all the answers and say you need to change this here and update this, but it will give you clues. So I think the first thing is to look at that, and then the second thing is just to test the different things out. And then track your numbers and see if it's making a difference, if the numbers are going the right way. If they are, you've got a clear read on continuing and on that being a success. And if they're not, then you need to try something else. So it's all just about testing and evaluating.
That's great. Thank you. And I think, like you say, just looking at analytics and getting an idea is really helpful, just to see sort of at what point people leave your site. I think you can get a bit lost in it, actually. There's so much on there. Get a bit addictive as well, can't it? But I think it is good to know. Because I think it's really easy. I mean, Shopify, if you use that, does give you some data, but it's quite limited in terms, it's just, how many people have visited today and how many have bought something. But it is quite good to know, as you say, at what point are you losing people if they're not choosing to buy something? Because I guess that would be the page maybe to focus on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's so helpful. Thank you so much for all that you've shared today, Anna. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And finally, Anna, I promise this is the last question. Can you just talk us through some of the things you can do to help small business owners with their e-commerce sites?
Yeah, of course. So I offer, so my most popular package is the Business Boost, which includes a site audit, basically reviewing the customer facing sites and also the analytics data, and then working out which areas could be improved and how you can increase your conversion. And then I also offer for small businesses that are just starting out, I also offer power hours where I do I can look at a range of different issues if there's any sort of specific issue that you're facing. And I also do pre-launch site reviews, so that if you've created a Shopify site by yourself and you're not quite sure if it's ready to go, or if there's anything you just want to have an extra pair of eyes, have a look at it and tell you that it's ready to launch. I also offer that as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. And as I say, I will link to your website in the show notes so everyone can come and find you really easily if they'd like to take a look at any of those services. So thank you again.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you so much for listening. As always, I would absolutely love to know what you thought of this episode. Please do remember to rate and review the show, and also, most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And as a reminder, I release a new episode every single Friday. So take care and look forward to speaking to you again then. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.